Very pleased now to be joined by the one, the only, the internationally famous. There's James Bond, and then there's Justis Mosqueda from SB Nation's Acme Packing Company. That really is an underselling way of kind of telling people who you are, Justis. You were here ahead of the Cowboys Packers game a few months ago now, but you really are, I think, the most immersed person I have ever encountered in my job in football world. Like you have footprints in all sectors of football. It feels like.
I mean, I like it. I love it. I breathe it. Yeah, I worked in personnel for a little bit, worked in media, did the draft stuff, have gone big into teams, big into schemes of coach. So yeah, got a little feeler in a little bit of everything, I guess.
Well, so it's for that reason that so when you joined SB Nation and we officially became coworkers, I was pumped because I was like, well, that Justis dude, he knows what he's talking about, right? And so we become a little bit more chummy, hanging around the virtual water cooler, so to speak. And you, unbeknownst to me, I find out are a Dak guy, right? Like there are so few people that aren't connected to the Cowboys that believe in Dak Prescott. I'm not saying they don't exist, but you know better than me. You are a minority as far as non-Cowboys people that believe him to be a functional, very good quarterback. In fact, I saw you tweet at Ben Baldwin when he quoted the Dan Orlovsky power rankings. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you effectively said that Dak and Joe Burrow were the same quarterback, right?
They're very similar.
Okay.
They're extremely similar. I mean, that's my comparison for Burrow coming out was Dak. So I don't know if I'm biased in that way, but you watch the way that they operate from not even necessarily from the gun, but from empty, they can run all the protection stuff like that. I understand there's physical limitations, right? Like
Sure.
These guys they're not Joe Burrow, they're not Josh Allen, they're not Patrick Mahomes, but as far as efficient quarterbacks, I sent you that stat from Next Gen Stats, and you were like, "This is my personal hell." But Next Gen Stats had a so the number one quarterback in the league in terms of positive EPA this season, from a percentage standpoint, Dak Prescott at 52%. That's the same as Patrick Mahomes, and then right after them, it's Jimmy Garoppolo with the Kyle Shanahan training wheels, and then Josh Allen at 49%. So, in terms of positive plays, Dak's going to get you on base a whole lot. And there's a lot to be said about that.
That's a really great way to put it, though, is he's going to get on base. And I don't even think he's he's not just going to hit 3 singles, but he's going to go 3 for 4 with 2 doubles in a single. You know what I mean? But then at the end of the game, it's going to be well, he didn't hit any home runs. He didn't have any RBIs. You know what I'm saying? And so that's where the shortcoming is. Obviously, this is a really delicate time for Cowboys fans, season ending a few days ago. And I think even you and your Dak support would admit that a lot of that, if not most of it, was on him. He did not play a great game.
Right.
And that's okay, right? Multiple things could be, it's not okay.
The game before he was lights out. I don't understand how we forget this. I understand 1 game sample size. It sucks to lose at the end of the season. Someone's got to be blamed. I'd still continue betting on Dak though.
So then
I understand the interceptions, but
be the guy or be that guy. Where do you rank him? If you have to tier them, you have to rank them, add whatever qualifier you want. Cause this is what the conversation, I don't know if you saw this, people are now oh, I would take Brock Purdy over Dak. I would take, the discourse that comes out of this.
No more with the Brock Purdy. Enough. I can't believe this. I saw him have statistically, it's something like the 3rd best playoff game in the history of the NFL. He didn't make any throws, and he missed a couple of them. I'm done. The Kyle Shanahan training wheels quarterbacks, they're not real. Imagine Dak with Kyle Shanahan. It'd be insane.
It would be insane. But to that point, imagine Kirk Cousins with Kyle Shanahan. I know you love Kirk, right, but that would be elite too. You know what I mean? The training wheels are a very, very real thing. So okay, you've worked personnel, you've done all sorts of football jobs, like we've said. You've got to build a team, the same kind of general cookie cutter question. You're taking Mahomes over Dak. You're taking Burrow over Dak, I imagine. Where else? Where does the line end for you?
Herbert, Lamar.
Still Lamar truther. I'm with you, but keep going.
I am a Lamar truther. I will be that guy. Josh Allen. Let me know if Matthew Stafford is healthy.
Wow, so you're kind of alone on that. I'm not riding the Stafford.
I thought Stafford, what he did last year in the pocket was insane. I think,
People are going to say like no Jalen Hurts. That's the question you're going to get.
I think I would still go Dak right now.
Why?
I know that's unpopular, but
Well,
like just
why? Like, he's on Twitter at Jumosq. We talked about how you would pronounce that. Jumosq. You can go Jew, whatever you want. But why? Like, what is, like, explain the why. That's because this gets caught up into like, he led the league in interceptions. He missed 5 games, blah, blah, blah. Like all this stuff. How come nobody's talking about Josh Allen this way? Like, these are the things that Cowboys fans are hearing and saying to one another.
so with Hurts, I think he is just really helped out with that offensive line and those skill players. When you look at their success numbers in the running game, it's hilarious how far ahead of everyone else in the league they are. And what you can do in the passing game when you're that good at running the ball, in part because he can run the option and they're willing to do that with him, and they're willing to just say, oh, 4th and 1, we'll just have a tight end push him across the line from under center. Like, I understand all those things and how it correlates with him being the quarterback. But I think if you put Dak in the same spot, he would have similar numbers, I guess. That's the toughest thing is, looking at the turmoil on the offensive line for the Dallas Cowboys, looking at the fact that Dak is in and out of the lineup. He's been hurt the past couple years, right? Obviously. Looking at the skill guys, right? Like, I understand like the best skill guy is probably Tony Pollard, and he's not even getting a full share of the snaps. And there's all those arguments about that. And CD's kind of like the one wide receiver. I thought Gallup had a really disappointing year this year. I don't know if Cowboys fans are feeling the same way. I just feel like there's definitely a better world for Dak Prescott than the situation that he's in Dallas right now. Which
I agree with you. And everything you said, like I wouldn't say you're tugging, but like all these threads are already out. You know what I mean? So you're just like kind of kicking the loose threads. Like they have all the slack in the world already. You mentioned the EPA stat that you sent me. I didn't send this to you. I don't know if you saw it. Austin Gale tweeted it on Wednesday, the day we're recording it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay, I'm going to Slack this to you while I'm explaining it. People are kind of coming for Michael Gallup right now, and that's a really unfortunate thing. I think the Cowboys set him up a little bit poorly, right? Like, hey, come back, bounce back from your torn ACL, like be the guy. And we sit here and we say like, well, they traded away Amari Cooper, and like, it's not just that they traded away Amari Cooper. It's that, okay, fine, you traded away Amari and you did not supplement that at all. Like the plan to fill the void was Michael Gallup.
I mean, I remember you on draft weekend. I was like, Tyler Smith is a pretty solid offensive lineman. And you're like, we needed a receiver.
We needed a receiver. And I look, I will eat all the Tyler Smith crow. Like, and now the Cowboys have a left tackle for a decade, seemingly, right? Like, so like that is a very nice world to live in, and it'll be awesome to get Terrence Steele back. Like that is, they're also pointing up there. But they're the only way everybody after the first round wide receiver didn't happen, everybody kind of pivoted to wanting George Pickens. Like that was the name, that go get George Pickens. Well, turns out kind of a good football player. But the Cowboys took Jalen Tolbert in the 3rd round, did nothing. The only time Jalen Tolbert actually did anything was against your Packers when he had the illegal formation and complained about it and blamed the refs. Which was really, really frustrating. But so the plan to fill the void left by Amari Cooper was CD would blossom, which he did, but then nobody filled the CD role like that, like from last year. You get what I'm saying? And Michael Gallup didn't do it. James Washington, the first free agent signing of the offseason, didn't do it. Jalen Tolbert didn't do it. If you look at what I sent you, of all Dallas Cowboys pass catchers, the second most positive EPA generated by any of them was T.Y. Hilton, who didn't join the team until December. That's stupid when you say it out loud.
Yeah, I mean, you watch their offense, and it's pretty clear CD's the guy, and he's kind of the only dude that you have to kind of game plan around. I mean, I know there's probably going to be Dalton Schultz discourse from here until free agency with you guys, right?
Everybody's out. Like there's no like Dalton Schultz guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
well, after that game, I mean, probably not. So yeah, yeah. I mean, I just think he probably needs a couple more weapons. Now, with that being said, there have been a couple birdies who have told me Kellen Moore might not be so happy with how this offense is going. And he thinks, and this is where it gets to playing styles, right? Because I guess the concern is what can Dak do off of like under center play action, right? And if you think about like the Cowboys and how traditionally they've been built, right? Like they gave Zeke that money. It's not to run from the gun or anything like that. It's not to pass catch. It's to run up the middle from under center, right?
Yeah.
They've traditionally had a very good offensive line wise, so you can establish the run and then play action off of that. Now, is there a legitimate concern about Dak off of play action and how those kind of things mesh, right? Like that's where I would hear the argument and being like, well, maybe this isn't necessarily like a one-to-one system fit. Because when I do think of Dak and what he does well, it's like being a point guard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not like I guess that's almost like a dated term now because all these point guards in the NBA are shooting for 30 points a game and stuff. But like being the distributor, from the pocket, being able to go into empty and just like, yep, I can get us in the right play, I can get us in the right protection, and I could deliver the ball in the right spot. And that's not really like the under center play action stuff. Is like you're trying to take shots, right? Like that's really what you're trying to do. And that's where I'm like, yeah, I probably wouldn't use Dak. Like that's probably not the best way to use Dak from an efficiency perspective. And I guess that's kind of where the frustration is probably setting in Dallas. So, I mean, how many? I know he's taking head coaching interviews. I don't know how many spots Kellen would
This
be
year,
like an actual candidate.
only one. He's only had one interview, and it's with the Panthers. And
With the
he's had like
Panthers.
he's had like the second round of interest. Steve Wilkes obviously has too. I mean, this is also like this is a third year that Kellen's taking head coaching interviews. I mean, he's not even 35 yet. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of nuts when
And he
you
still
look
hasn't
at that.
gotten the gig. I mean, I'm sure that's why his frustration was building a little bit because he's like, oh man, my name is cooling off.
Well, he's
And
only
like,
been a head coach or a coach in general for 5 years. He was
right.
the quarterback's coach right away, and then immediately became offensive coordinator. And so, I mean, like this was his fourth year. Like it's really rare to
Mhm.
reach 4 years. In fact, I forget we did this over the last offseason. I think that since like 2008, only 15 offensive coordinators have made it to a fourth year, and one of them, incidentally, was Scott Linehan with the Cowboys. So like, I don't know if that's just like the Cowboys not wanting to get off the pot kind of thing with
No,
their
I was looking
coordinators.
at DCs the other day and I was like, Joe Barry is one of like the longest tenured DCs in the NFL right now. And he's only been on the job for like 2 years. Like Minnesota hired Ed Donatel and canned him already. Like, yeah, coordinators change like crazy. It's not a job. You're either falling or you're rising, in terms of the NFL ranks.
And I think that's where like the target has always been on Dak, right? Like, I mean, Cowboys quarterback, whatever, but like I think people are kind of tired, like bagging on Kellen or blaming Kellen. Like, I'm not saying Kellen is wonderful or completely fallible, but like everybody's kind of exhausted of that. Like, I think like Dak has been the lowest on the priority list of like the hit list, right? Like everybody's come for McCarthy, you know what that's like. Everybody's come for Kellen Moore. Everybody's come for the Zeke contract, and blah blah blah. Trying to build your team like the '90s. Like, there's kind of nowhere left for Dak. Like, you know what I mean? There's no
Yeah.
like shield, and that's why I do think the discourse, aside from the fact that he had the interceptions and he played really poorly, with the season on the line, but like this is the offseason of reckoning for Dak, because like they could get out of his deal next year if they don't touch it
Next
this
year.
offseason.
Yeah.
So like this
Which
is
that's a huge point because I've seen people talk about, a Dak potential trade even like this offseason. I'm like, that's not gonna
yeah,
happen.
it's not practical, right?
But yeah, I mean, a thing everyone should be watching is do they touch it, right? Because you're either creating cap space or you're trying to get out of it at this point, and you almost tell it a year ahead of time. So if they don't touch Dak's contract, I think it'll be telling what kind of a market they're in. And oh, hey, there was a quarterback who played 3 state title games in AT&T Stadium who had his ACL surgery done by Dallas's team, so they have his medicals. Like, I don't know.
I mean, yeah, like it is crazy how quickly time goes. Not every franchise justice is fortunate enough to have a franchise quarterback for like 15 years at a time. You know what I mean? And only get 2 Super Bowls out of it, though. For what it's worth.
Jordan Love's coming, baby. Don't you worry about it.
but, but you're right. Like, and we kind of thought that last year when they didn't touch the Zeke deal, because we kind of thought
Mhm.
like they might touch the Zeke deal and kick some of this down the road and lock him into 2023, but they didn't, which is why we're having that conversation right now. Although there are the reports that he's open to the pay cut, but I'm with you. They did kind of build this deal to alleviate some space kind of annually. They've done that. Like, it's not a foreign thing. Like the Cowboys have done it with like Tyron Smith and stuff. Like it's set up that same way. But if they didn't, that would be a really tense summer. You know what I mean? If they didn't touch Dak's deal.
Yeah, I do think that they are in a spot where it's, I mean, you don't want to say pro. I mean, he's made a Pro Bowl and stuff before, but it's funny. You look at the landscape of the NFC quarterbacks. Dak's one of the better NFC quarterbacks out
He
there.
might be number 2. Like he
Yeah.
really, like, even if you consider Jalen Hurts to be number 1, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but like no offense to Aaron Rodgers, he's not there right now. Tom Brady's obviously not there right now. I mean, so like who is the second best quarterback in the NFC if it's not Dak? Kyler, Kirk, like those are the options that we're talking about here.
There's not that many, which is why I think it's funny. But I do think he is not necessarily an approve it for like his skill set, but like almost like approve it in terms of like the structure of the Cowboys and like where they're going and the scheme fit and all that stuff. I do think it's kind of heading there where there is a little uneasiness going into this upcoming season. I mean, it is what it is, and I do think if push comes to shove, I do think Dallas would do things like entertain, like, hey, is Kyler happy? Right? Like, is Kyler happy in Arizona after this offseason? Like, could we try to make a play for him? Could we try to make a play for someone else? Like, I do think they would entertain it next year if Dak puts
it's
up
more the
similar
same.
numbers.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's okay. That's
What
perfectly fine.
what do you make
if
of
you
that?
let Dak go, you're gonna get draft picks for him, like and stuff like that. They'll have a plan at quarterback. I don't think they'll go into the offseason blind. Like, root for your quarterback, and whatever happens, happens.
What do you make of that? Because that's like this take has been thrown out a lot. Like, look, Mahomes and Burrow, they're quarterbacks that can elevate. They can be the straw that stirs the drink. You have the quarterbacks who can carry a team, but then you have guys who you have to surround them with elite talent. Like, what a shocker, that any all-time quarterback,
I mean,
Aaron
do
Rodgers.
they not have talent? Like,
But
Mahomes has like the best pass catching tight end ever, and had Tyreek Hill,
right.
And Burrow has a guy that he's had chemistry with since he was at LSU.
The Burrow point is legitimate from the offensive line standpoint, right? Like, especially like recency bias, because it's like, holy crap, this offensive line fell apart and he's still like pulling it off, whatever. But like,
he does get the piss beat out of him.
Right. So like the people are putting Dak, and I'm not like, I don't have the energy to like have this fight anymore, but like they're putting him into that category. Like, he can be great if you surround him with great talent. Again, what a foreign concept that like great players are better with like great teams.
Like, I feel like that guy is like Kirk Cousins, where you're like, he is gonna crap the bed unless you give him Justin Jefferson. And I just think Dak is a different tier than he is. You know what I mean? Like, I don't believe that. I think Dak is a quality quarterback. I think if he hit the open market, he would get probably something close to like whatever Deshaun got. Like, if it was like a true open market bidding. I think he's right around top like 8, 10, whatever that cutoff is. But I think it's less important about like the number than like the tier. He is not in the Kirk Cousins tier. He is above that tier, which is like, yeah, you hold on to him unless you have a much better option.
Like we mentioned Lamar, and you know how people were like, man, I know you mentioned this on the NFL show too. Like, I don't know why people were like counting his practices missed. Like, that was so strange. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
like Lamar's now missed 48 practices. Like when does that ever happen? But in a similar way, the monetary value associated with Dak became like burned into people's minds. Like, so people are like, you can't pay him $40 million. $40 million for a quarterback right now is
you
cheap.
can.
Yeah, no, but like that's what I'm saying. Like,
Aaron Rodgers went 8 and 9, and the Packers are begging for him to come back on $60 million in cash just for next season. You can pay Dak $40 million. It's fine.
That's my point. Is like when that happened, people decided that $40 million was like this infinite value of money. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, Deshaun's making more than that, right? Like, Josh Allen's making more than that now, right? Like, the $40 million mark is cheap now. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like when maybe it's just like the like round nice numbers, but it was like when Matt Ryan hit 30 million a year, that became the like, you can't pay a guy like Matt Ryan's 30 million a year became like pennies like very quickly after.
Yeah. It's the money for quarterbacks. We got to stop thinking about it. And I know everyone is like, I know everyone does the whole thing where it's like, rookie contracts and how important that stuff is, and you can build around the team, but you do the math and it's like, okay, so if we give, say, Geno Smith, right? Like, Geno Smith right now he's gonna hit free agency, or if he does hit free agency, he'll make what, like 25 a year. Mm-hmm. So the difference between Dak and Geno is 15 million. That's in offensive linemen now. because it's everyone's pay is going up
Right.
like crazy, right? So
Well,
like,
it's
what you could have paid Elton Jenkins? Like, is that the difference? Do you think the difference between Dak Prescott and Geno Smith is Elton Jenkins? Like,
yeah.
come on, like just
I mean,
you got to get on base in the draft, and you got to have a quarterback, and those are the only two truths, in the NFL, to win a championship in the NFL, unless you're Kyle Shanahan and you can just have Brock Purdy or whoever under center.
you've done the baseball thing. Like you are kind of Jonah Hill in Moneyball with the I like you're paying for runs. You know what I'm saying? Like that's who you've been like that. That's like the. Are you a Mariners fan? I think you are.
Right? No, I'm a Doyers fan.
How?
Julio. He's Mexican and he pitches.
Okay.
So he said I have a good left arm and a bad left eye. So that was enough for me.
Okay, that works. But I mean, well, that's your territory. So that's why I didn't know if like the Mariners were your thing. Like, also, you kind of embody the energy of Mariners fans. You know what I mean? Like this, like
I do.
So
PNW baby, can't get it out of me.
And because you do root for the Blazers. That's why I thought you were gonna like make a Dak Dame Lillard thing when you were talking about the point guards. But
no, I can't talk about the Blazers after they gave up that massive loss, that massive lead against the Lakers, and didn't score at all in the third quarter. So
it's a tough time for like this is going to be a really, really tough.
I'm sure you're open wounds, dude. It's open wounds right now. I get that, but like, come on, you guys can do a lot worse than Dak.
I think you are well suited to answer this question, and maybe even more suited than I am at this point, because I find it like if Aaron Rodgers is traded to the Jets, it will be incredible how like history has like literally repeated itself in that way, shape, or form.
Also, it would be incredible for him to play for Woody Johnson, whose money comes from Johnson & Johnson. So that'd be fun for me to check out.
I will miss if Aaron Rodgers leaves. You're the fact that you have to like so astutely tune into the Pat McAfee show every week. I know that you enjoy that.
Can't sleep in the morning. Any day it could be Rodgers is coming back, or Rodgers said something, or Rodgers is on this podcast on that one. Yeah.
Okay, so where I think you're well suited, the question I think you're well suited to answer. For the first time ever in Dak's career, I now feel like he is partly weighed down by the ghosts of Cowboys past, right? Like the Packers don't have as prominent of ghosts, but like there are different kinds of ghosts, right? Like every franchise deals with it in their own way, whatever. But like I do now feel like because he came in such a different way. Like he came in, started right away, right? Like was this rookie sensation, was super cool, and the team like gravitated towards him, whatever. So it didn't feel like the dawn of the Romo era, just to compare him to at least his predecessor. But now it does feel like, and I'm sure you've seen like the memes and stuff, like he's got the same playoff record as Romo, can't get past the divisional round like Romo. He's got all the like very, very sort of similar resume at this point in time. And it, as of late, has felt like Rodgers is kind of fighting the like Favre mystique, right? And so like it kind of feels like that's where Dak is at. I don't know if you agree. As an impartial observer, do you kind of feel like that is a thing that is now arriving and as he turns 30 this offseason?
Well, I do think it's a thing because you guys keep bringing it up. I mean, how many times do we have to see, like, before the game they were showing, what was it? They had the photos of the baby photos of all the kids, at the time that the Cowboys last won their playoff game or whatever it was. And they keep bringing up the 90s and, we haven't won since the 90s. The Bears haven't won a Super Bowl in longer than that. They don't do that.
The Niners haven't. The team who just beat them haven't. That gets lost too.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I'm sure it's like a thing now because you guys are like manifesting it almost. You guys are playing with the Ouija board, summoning the ghosts. Wow. That's the problem.
So along those lines, we were talking before we started recording about your fashion. I noticed Dak on the plane to Tampa and the plane to San Francisco, he wore some like kind of 90s Cowboys hats, like the shark tooth.
I saw that too.
And I really thought, because he didn't just do it for one game, I really kind of thought he was like, I don't know, like manifesting or whatever, like, we're putting an end to this type of thing, like sort of thing. But you're right. Like they do kind of like to live there. You know what I mean? They do sort of like embrace it. Like, that's why, like, I kind of appreciated when McCarthy was like, look, the sins of the past are not on us. You know what I mean? But he was the one who did do the baby picture thing. So
it happens. Right. I'll just say you'll see the rift between Dak and maybe the coaching staff. If they start leaking stuff, and you start getting the hit pieces on Dak, you'll know where it's coming from. I've been there before.
So, okay, this is my last sort of like question area. We talked Dak. You believe. So basically, anybody who doesn't believe, Justis thinks you're dumb and ugly. I think.
I'm just like, okay, I'll take him. I'll take him then. There's plenty of teams want to get Dak
actually,
Prescott.
let me ask you, sir. Would you trade Aaron Rodgers for Dak Prescott straight up right now?
Here's the problem. I really like Jordan Love.
In a Jordan Love-less world, if your starting quarterback can only be Rodgers or Dak.
Okay. Yeah, I would, especially considering age.
Right.
I'll take the rest of Dak's career over the next year or two of Aaron. I mean, he might retire this offseason. Good luck with that. So,
I wouldn't trade the job that we have to do around okay. So this is going to be year 4 of Mike McCarthy. You've been there, you've done it, you've seen it, you've lived it. Advice, words of wisdom, like words from afar. Like what is your perception of the Mike McCarthy era 3 years in? The Mike McCarthy era with the Cowboys, obviously.
I'm not super impressed, but I am. I mean, he has changed as a coach. He's not as like dug into his own tendencies as he used to be, right? Like the fact that he hired his buddies, right, year 1, and then had to can a lot of them, right? I mean, that shows growth. When he was in Green Bay, he had someone call plays for like half a season and was like, I'll never ever ever do that again. Well, yeah, we see how that works out. So I mean, there has been growth, but I mean, at the end of the day, he's kind of like a CEO guy. So like you're kind of gonna judge him just off of like the strength of his coordinator hires, right? And Dallas is always going to be willing to spend money, on a coaching staff and stuff like that. So as long as you guys can find a replacement for, a guy like a Dan Quinn, if he does end up leaving, like I think you'll be happy with him. But I don't know if he elevates anything, to a higher level. I think there's more room for growth at head coach than there is at quarterback. I'll say that.
I actually asked a friend of mine, like who he thought ranked higher and like in their respective positions, like McCarthy relative to head coaches or Dak relative to quarterbacks. You think the answer is Dak?
I think it's Dak. Yeah.
So if you think Dak is like 8 or 9, again, like rounding here, or approximating. So you think Mike McCarthy is like fringe top 10 coaches in the NFL?
I'm gonna look at a list right now.
So we would take all 4 of the conference teams, right? Like easily.
Yeah.
We would take McDermott. That's 5. Yeah. I think some people would take Peterson, John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin. We're at 7. Dan
Campbell.
I'm not quite there, but
I'd take Dan. I'd take Matt LaFleur.
I can't argue against Matt LaFleur. I'm not as big of a McVay truther as a lot of people, but
come on.
Well, like I'm fine.
You're not taking McVay over.
I didn't
McCarthy?
say that. I didn't say. I'm just like I'm not fawning over McVay the way a lot of people have. To be clear, I'm not accusing you of fawning, but like the fawning exists. That's all I'm saying. I'm not gonna fawn, but I'm cool taking McVay. I'm looking at my helmet.
Tomlin.
We didn't even mention Belichick.
Dayball, Belichick, McDaniel is a guy that I'd at least consider. I think that's probably where my list.
Did we mention Dable? I don't think we mentioned Dable.
I said Dable.
So
yeah, I mean that's more than 10.
What about if Dan Quinn's on the list?
I think Dan Quinn is right up there with him. Right. Maybe, probably a little higher.
So if Dan Quinn's on the list, then you're putting Quinn ahead of him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting.
So, yeah.
I mean, I think he's a little underrated there, but I think Dak is like perfectly slotted. You know what I'm saying? Like if we put Dak around 8 or 9, like that feels really right. You can certainly argue McCarthy over like Dable or McVay. You know what I mean? Like some of these other people, like whatever. He doesn't have as great of a PR team as a lot of these other people do. And you know that better than I do.
I mean, I don't know. He got a whole NFL Network thing following him for an entire year. So
the more I look back on that, like the more ridiculous it is. Like especially
he said he spent a day with Pro Football Focus and now is in analytics. People spend. This was the line I used at the time. People spend more time researching their fantasy drafts than he spent with PFF.
The only like counter to that, I know you say that somewhat tongue in cheek, is like we have seen analytical principles within his style of coaching.
He's like, for sure grown.
That's what I'm saying.
He's a better coach than he was in Green Bay. 100%.
So like his actions live up to that mystique. You know what I'm saying? Like he's not flawless, but like he is not, like caveman or anything like that. He does kind of, jive with that. That's interesting. I'm very interested to see what happens with Dan Quinn. In a weird way, like my last point on McCarthy, I value Kellen Moore. There's a lot of Cowboys fans who are like, get Kellen Moore out of here. I've seen enough, blah, blah, blah. I value him. But in a weird way, like this year, 2023, has to be the year where you figure out this era of Cowboys football. You have to figure out Dak. 100%. You have to figure out McCarthy, right? Like you cannot,
things got to come together. It's not separate pieces. Things have to come together.
And something I've said from like, maybe after everybody bagged on McCarthy for 2020, that wasn't totally his fault. Obviously, Dak got injured and stuff. But like something I said in that offseason as people were freaking out was like, you cannot let the McCarthy era end without seeing him as a play caller. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can't bring in the like guy who made his hay in the NFL on the offensive side of the ball and never let him control the offensive side of the ball. Yeah. If you did, then the whole thing was stupid. You know what I mean? Like imagine hiring, I don't know, whoever. Like imagine hiring Bill Walsh and like being like, well, Kellen Moore is your offensive coordinator, Bill Walsh. You know what I mean? Like it just wouldn't make sense. So
yeah. I want to ask one thing. How do you experience that final play? What's your reaction? Because they come out, funky formation, get a timeout. Me, I'm like, holy crap, we're about to see something. And then it comes out, Zeke's at center, he's ineligible. They did all that to get one more skill guy on the field. And then it's a slant and it got blown up.
So I've obviously thought about the final play, both a lot and not a lot. And it was weird, like, how people say like a lot, like, oh, it's like watching a car crash in slow motion. It really was like that, especially because of the timeout. And I saw
in the hit was a little car crash. Yeah.
I saw Chris Long make this point on his podcast. Like, it is amazing that they like not only, so somebody was like, this is a good idea. And somebody else was like, I agree with you. This is a good idea. Right. And so they went and did it. And then the timeout happens. And then they double down. Like the first person is like, I maintain this is a good idea. And the other person's like, I'm still with you. This is a good idea. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe I'm okay with it if it's like, look, we got to run one thing. Nobody has any timeouts. We're just going off the play clock. We're trying to catch them off guard. But like, if they're calling a timeout, like they're clearly prepared. Again, not that it's like a flawless play to begin with, but like it somehow was more embarrassing than the final play last year. I didn't like, and that like some people argued that. Some people were like, I could kind of understand the quarterback draw. And like, if you were like a lawyer and your job was to defend the QB draw, you could do it. You know what I mean? Like maybe you wouldn't feel great about it, but you could.
It's a tough job, but you could do it for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing here. And the like irony or whatever is like, that could be Zeke's last play as a Cowboy. It's like, and it's so funny that not only did it not work, but that Zeke gets blasted. I mean, like just all like, I actually really respect the Niners for not like being soft in that moment. You know what I mean? Like just like ending it.
They're and like then put pressure on it, putting pressure on it.
And then like, okay, season's on the line. We're going to throw it to Kevontae Turpin. And that like, this is the catalyst, right? This is all we needed was Zeke to block and give us a moment for Kevontae Turpin. I mean, I don't know, man. The end was so embarrassing, like the Dalton Schultz thing, like twice, not getting out of bounds, not getting your feet down. And a moment, I've said this a lot, that Dak is not catching enough heat for is almost taking that safety. Like, dude, how do you get anywhere near position to almost take a safety like that? Like and that's what causes me to doubt Dak now is like, there's a lot of evidence of him kind of shrinking in these big moments. And like, it's super lame to say like, oh, he comes up small in big moments, but like, that's kind of true at this point.
Yeah, no, it is interesting because it's true, but it does sound like the like hot take,
right?
Shock jock,
and that's why I feel dumb saying it.
Tell him to win, do it again.
But it is true, right? Like we've seen that, like, and you can say like, he's 0-3 in the divisional round, and so it's kind of stupid for a dude who's played 7 seasons to make his career about 3 games, right? But like, those are 3 really important games.
The Rodgers game, absurd. If Jared Cook doesn't make one of the best catches ever,
or if Rodgers fumbles off of Jeff Heath, right? Like, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, you can if and a lot of things when it comes to the Cowboys, but you could do that with anybody, right? Like, you could say like if this or if that, whatever. And so they just find a way to do this amazingly in the most like polarizing way possible, to where people are gonna like. And what's frustrating, and I was gonna say you've been there. You haven't been there. Like you haven't earned the crud that I've earned, or walked through it the way I'm Andy Dufresne in the tunnel. I mean, you're red. You got out like easily. But like like I said, there's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to run if you defend Dak this offseason, right? Like how can you? Because it does sound like hot take, sport jock, whatever. But like, people can be like, look how you played with the season on the line. Like you cannot explain this away in any way, shape, or form. And that is uncharted territory for Dak. Like there's always been some sort of shield for him. There isn't anymore.
That's why you got to use my shield, which was just, he didn't have a good game. Look at the game before. He was good the game before, and that's all you got.
So this is the last thing I'll say. We'll get out of here. This brought you joy, I know, but when the Eagles blasted the Giants on Saturday night, I thought it was so funny how there was so much collateral damage for the Vikings. Right? Like even their season's over, but like Twitter is ablaze with like, how bad were the Vikings? Like the Vikings should fire Ed Donatel again, and it's like the Giants are the team getting waxed here. Like why are we throwing shade at the Vikings right now?
The Daily Norseman was like, we're not gonna call them frauds. It's like you don't have to. You lost to them. So
I think that's dumb.
Both of those teams sucked. Both of those teams were terrible.
The only time I really felt like the Vikings were frauds, I'll tell you, was when they complained about the cleat stuff. Like that was super loser energy. Like that was really, really, really weak.
The biggest loser energy.
Right.
Especially when their training staff had like come out and said like, yeah, the dudes just want to wear their fancy cleats and they don't want to like actually. Like we told them throughout the week. Kevin O'Connell after the game was like, yeah, guys got to wear the right cleats. They're professionals. It's like,
that's what McCarthy said after the game in Green Bay. Well, like same sort of thing. But anyway, in a similar way, the fact that the Cowboys lost now, like, nobody really cares about the Bucs. Like the moment Tom Brady officially leaves the Bucs return to like pure NFL insignificance.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But like the Cowboys losing was like, oh, you mean the 8 and 9 Bucs? Like when the week leading up to Dallas Tampa was like, I don't know, man. Like what I'm saying?
There were a lot of people who said I don't pick against Brady.
Right.
I don't pick against Brady.
But now, because the Cowboys lost to the Niners, it's like, oh, that win you're bragging about, Justis, over the 8 and 9 Bucs. It's funny how like something that a team has nothing to do with can like completely change their own narrative. You know what I mean? Like if the Niners wax the Eagles this week, it will be like, well, hey, Dallas only lost to them by a touchdown, and it took like they were in it on the final play, the Zeke snap. You know what I mean? Like it's dumb and it's stupid and it's beautiful and I hate everything. Justis, last time you were on, when you left, I asked you what you were watching on Netflix, so I will ask you that again. It doesn't have to be Netflix. Give us something to. Now, I have time now, so you've had some time for a few weeks. Couldn't get it done against Dan Campbell. See, like I think that's a cope that fans use. Like now you need Dan Quinn to be really good to reverse justify why the Packers
lost.
But
is he gonna get the Broncos job? I think it's gonna end up.
You mean Dan Quinn now?
Yeah, Dan Quinn.
Maybe. I hope Sean Payton takes the job, so I don't have to deal with this crap.
I don't think he's gonna. I don't think he's gonna take the job. I don't think he's gonna get it.
Give us something to watch. Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, Peacock, whatever you want.
So last time I think I gave you guys Coherence, which is a good movie. Mm-hmm. So I'll go with another one. 10 Cloverfield Lane. It's a Cloverfield movie, but it's not a Cloverfield movie. You don't have to watch. That's the one with the
camera like shook, right? Cloverfield.
Yeah. But this one is like, it's like during the same timeline, but it has nothing to do with the other Cloverfield movies until like the last 10 minutes. So you don't have to watch anything else. Apparently, you can watch it for free on Pluto TV. So there you go.
That's not an ad. That's just. Literally you can access it.
It's not an ad. It's what showed up on the Google. So,
Justis Mosqueda on Twitter at JewMosque. Thank you so much for joining us and hopefully talking people down. We love you, and I hope you have something delicious for dinner.
I hope so too. Yeah, anytime.